let me geek out for a bit and let's talk about UFOs. Welcome to the Soapbox. I hope everyone is doing all right. It is about to storm here, so if the lights or something go out, I apologize. That is an act of God. That is not an act of me. My name is Jamarl Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. And yeah, let's talk about UFOs. As all of you know, this is pretty much a pet subject of mine. I am enamored by this topic. I am even, to some degree, more enamored, if not hearkened by the public not being as enamored as I am in this. We are a ball hurling through the cosmos. The fact that we exist, I don't understand why we wouldn't assume that something else would exist somewhere else that is living an experience where they're experiencing things. And in the same way we have an interest in figuring out who we are and what's out in the cosmos, I don't necessarily know why something else would necessarily have that interest. And I don't even understand why we necessarily assume we have the highest thing on the food chain within a galaxy or within a universe like this. Nevertheless, oftentimes these questions have been tamped down. Conspiracy theorists. Oh, there's nothing there. We're a jewel in a box that God created and nothing else is outside of it. We just float around the empty void. I don't believe that. And apparently, neither does the U.S. Navy. So the New York Times comes out with a bombshell piece saying that Navy pilots have been seeing UFOs near daily. Their words, not mine. Near daily. They had no idea what it is. Now, Chris Mullin goes on Fox News, Fox and Friends, and Chris Mullin kicks this up a notch. He's a former U.S. defense official. And Chris Mullin, apparently I can't show the article, but Chris Mullin kicks this up a notch and makes the point of saying, look, the question here is not whether or not these things are real. The question is, who are they and why are they here? And the language that Chris Mullin is using in this is in issues of defense. We need to figure out what this is. This is a vital security interest, quote unquote. This is something that we need to understand. Chris Mullin also said something that contradicts the previous statement. He says, we already knew they were here. Like, the information that the New York Times was publishing, this notion that, oh, golly gee, this just took place, is nonsense. This has been going on for decades. This is information that the U.S. government already had. They knew that these things existed. And up to this point, his point is this information needs to be out. This information needs to be studied. Now, a few main points. And I'm going to end this because I don't want this one to be long. I think this is interesting. I'm putting the articles at the bottom. Chris Mullin's point here is very basic. Chris Mullin wants this information out. And it seems that he's decided that the way to get this information out is through areas of defense. Now, for him to say these things have been around for decades, and they have. There are various reports. You can look back at what Foo Fighters were. You can look back at stuff going back all the way from, the Roswell crash. Barney Hill. All of these things that had taken place, for the most part, have been tamped down. Now they're coming up to the surface. Mullin says we already knew they were here. If they've been here for decades, I would argue probably longer, but if they've been here for decades, and there's never been an issue, then I suspect that security is not necessarily of the highest issue. Meaning, if you had a technology that Mullin is, by using the terms, why are they here, it's given this impression that there is another intellect in the process. If that is indeed true, and they have indeed been here for decades, and nothing has taken place between those decades, then there's no reason for me to believe that there is all of a sudden this threat. It's a threat. But the words are chosen for a reason. One of the things that George Knapp made the point of, that there are multiple sections of, let's say, the intelligence community that want this information out. And it seems that the way they've chosen to try to get this information out is through the intelligence system. The defense system. If we scare the shit out of people enough, that those people will be willing to invest money into figuring out what it is. And not just what it is, it would bring it to the surface. So it's not this thing that's worked about and talked about in the shadows. It's something that's talked about and discussed in public. To some degree, this has shown a certain degree of success. the Navy coming out and changing their policy on this is big, because that's essentially an acknowledgement that there's something out there that our pilots are seeing, and it's lunacy for us to pretend that there is not. That's massive. That's an aspect, a large aspect of the U.S. community that is just turned over and acknowledging something. There's another piece to this. In fact, there's a few pieces to this, but I'm not going to do this long. Part of it is this thing that the Navy has decided, yes, we're going to look into this issue. Yes, there's something here. Yes, we're going to allow our pilots to talk about this. But no, we're not going to say anything about it. Well, that's lunacy. There's no way you're going to be able to keep that up. Yes, there are UFOs out there. No, we don't know what they are. No, we're not going to talk about it. That's not going to last. Something is going to have to be done about it. You can't have the system where pilots are coming out to the New York Times and talking about their stories and nothing gets done or nothing is acknowledged from the standpoint of a governmental system. The government itself is going to have to acknowledge this issue, because they're going to start getting asked more questions about this. These stories are all over the place. Don't believe me, just look it up, put in UFOs. There's one very important point to this that will be fascinating to watch. One, does this go into fear-based area? Meaning, do people get freaked out by this type of questioning and this type of dialogue and start investing more money into the defense industry? That's the first point. The second point is, this takes a cork out of a bottle from the standpoint of science. The moment that you acknowledge there's something coming to our shores, we don't know what it is, but there's something coming to our shores. In one of the cases, the pilot recounts a spherical object. In other cases, they're recounting these things that are going at speeds and velocities that we can't match. And even if we could match, it would crush our body. The moment that you start asking questions is, how's that work? Oh! And that's not a little thing. That's a major thing. How does that work? Like, the moment that you say, yes, there's something coming to our shores, great. Our science said that's not possible to do. All right, then something is wrong with our science. What is their capability? How do they go from point A to point B? How do they reach those speeds? How are they protecting the physical system if there's a physical system in those craft? Is there a physical system, a way that can withstand those forces? Do they have to withstand those forces at all? Is there technology that prevents them from doing that? Are they really going at those velocities? Is it possible that they're going from point A to point B without going through the intervening space? How do they do what they do? Those are questions that people are almost immediately going to have answers to. If we're playing a game and I'm giving you a puzzle, it's one thing for you to know that there is an answer, that it exists. There's another thing for you to not know whether it exists. The moment that I say, yes, an answer exists, even though you don't necessarily know what that answer is, you're going to sit your ass down there and you're going to find the answer, as opposed to not knowing whether it's true or not. And this, I know that sounds a little weird, but what I'm saying is, the moment that you tell the physicists, the scientists, the technocrats, or the technologists of your world that yes, something is getting from point A to point B, meaning the thing that you thought wasn't possible is indeed possible. You just need to look again at the puzzle. Man. By the same token, the problem and my fear is that this goes into more of a fear-based area, and that this goes into, okay, we need to defend ourselves against something that's coming to our shores that apparently been here for decades, that's never caused any particular issue, but now we got to fight it. And we need to spend trillions of dollars to do it. Fingers crossed it doesn't go that way. I wish I could show you the article itself, but he makes a very particular point that's terrifying to me. He says, fascination turned to fear one day when a Super Hornet pilot said he almost collided with one of the objects, which he described as a spherical sphere encasing a cube. An official report was filed and the incident was shattered the previous theory of Navy pilots that the objects were part of some sort of extremely classified operation. They thought these things were some kind of like black operations thing, and they're like, well, no, that's not it at all. One, there have been near air collisions, so this is a safety issue. Two, there's a vital national security interest where our sovereignty is being violated by vehicles of unknown origin. Right there. Our sovereignty is being violated. Look at the language. Look at the language. Something that has been here for decades, but our sovereignty is being violated. It's true that we don't necessarily know what it is, but it is not necessarily true that it is a threat. And I've heard people online saying, well, I mean, maybe they're just waiting to technology get to the point where they can attack us. I don't know why anybody would do that, but okay. All right, I'll end this here because, like I said, I don't want this one to be long. This is me slightly geeking out. I would say people need to be very careful with what they wish. I am the hippie welcoming this stuff, and so I say this even for myself. Personally, I want this stuff talked about in the open. I think it's fascinating conversations. The part that terrifies me is more so what becomes of it. Is there a kumbaya moment where the people of the planet come together with this notion of, hey, there's something beyond our shores and our personal problems are minor in comparison to the larger thing beyond our shores? And does that kumbaya moment, however, lead to a kumbaya moment for us, but a pointing guns at something else with higher technology? Does it mean one country trying to pacify other countries using excellent or radical technology? I don't know. But all of this stuff becomes a reality the moment that you get into this kind of space age conversation that it seems that some of the papers are on the cusp of having. Many of the newspapers seems to be still within this notion of, is it real and is there something there? But there apparently are a lot of people that, well beyond the conversation, is trying to force this into the light of day. By all accounts, at least by looking over the media, Fox News, New York Times, Washington Post, etc., they seem to be having some level of success. So, I'll end this here. Thanks all.